I still remember the day she left, not because of what she said, but because of how quiet the house got afterward. No slamming doors, no screaming, just silence. The kind that makes you hear your own heartbeat, and you realize someone's absence can be louder than their presence ever was. Her name was Emily, my wife for 5 years, my girlfriend since college, my reason for working extra shifts just to keep her happy. She used to tell me, "You dream too small, Jack. You're always chasing things that don't pay off." Maybe she was right, because when Grandpa died and left me his old, falling-apart farm, I thought it was a blessing. She thought it was a joke. When the lawyer read the will, Emily rolled her eyes. "A farm? Seriously? Your grandpa couldn't even give us money for a down payment on a house?" I laughed it off, pretending it didn't sting. Grandpa had raised me after my parents died. That farm was where I learned to fix things, feed animals, and wake up before dawn. But Emily saw it differently. She saw a burden, a symbol of everything she thought she'd escaped when she married me. We drove out there the week after the funeral. The house looked like time had forgotten it. Cracked windows, vines crawling up the porch, a rusted windmill that creaked every time the wind shifted. Emily stepped out of the car, looked around, and said, "This place smells like mold and regret." I tried to laugh, but it caught in my throat. I told her, "It's just old. I can fix it up. Maybe start a small farm stand, make something of it." She gave me that look, the one that told me she'd already made up her mind. That night, while I unpacked, she was scrolling on her phone, calling it our last night in this dump. The next morning, she was gone. No note, no goodbye. Just a text that said, "I can't do this anymore. You and that farm can rot together." I stood in the empty kitchen, staring at the half-eaten cereal bowls she'd left on the counter, and for the first time in my life, I felt like maybe everyone else had been right. Maybe dreams really don't pay off. The days that followed were a blur. I tried to sell the farm, but no one wanted it. Too remote, too old, too expensive to fix. So I stayed, not because I loved it, but because I had nowhere else to go. Then, about a week later, something strange happened. I was out back, cutting through the overgrown grass behind the barn, when the ground gave way beneath my foot. I nearly fell in. It was a narrow hole, like the earth had swallowed a piece of itself. Inside was darkness, cold, silent, deep. When I shone my flashlight down, I saw something metallic glinting under the dirt. A handle, rusted but unmistakably a door handle. It was attached to a steel hatch, buried halfway under the barn. That's when I realized Grandpa's worthless farm was hiding something he never told anyone about. And that was the first night I stopped missing my wife, and started wondering what exactly Grandpa had left behind. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about that hatch. All night, I kept hearing the wind rattle the barn walls, but in my head, it sounded like something knocking. Soft, rhythmic, patient. By sunrise, I'd convinced myself it was nothing. Just metal shifting, right? But deep down, I knew better. When I went out to the barn, I saw it again. That faint outline in the dirt. It didn't look new. It looked ancient. The steel was thick, hand-forged, the kind you'd only see in old fallout shelters or secret bunkers. What the hell would Grandpa need something like that for? I found a shovel and started digging. The soil was hard and damp, packed with roots and old nails. Every time I hit the metal surface, it echoed, a hollow, distant sound, like knocking on a coffin lid. After 20 minutes, I cleared enough dirt to expose the whole thing. It was a rectangular hatch, about 4 feet long, sealed tight with a padlock so rusted it looked fused to the latch. I went back to the house, grabbed a crowbar, and went to work. When the lock finally snapped, it made a sound that didn't belong in that quiet morning. Crack, sharp, violent, final. And then, the smell hit me. Not rot, not decay, but earth. Wet, stale, untouched for decades. I hesitated. Grandpa was a quiet man, but he'd always told me, "Some things on this farm aren't meant to be disturbed." Back then I thought he meant the cornfields or the beehives. Now I wasn't so sure. I opened the hatch. A metal ladder led straight down into darkness. I shone my flashlight, but the beam barely reached the bottom. Dust floated in the air like snowflakes. The walls were concrete. Something about it felt wrong, too deliberate. This wasn't just storage. This was built to hide something. I climbed down. Each rung creaked beneath my boots. When I reached the bottom, my light caught a small underground room, maybe 10 by 10 feet. It was empty, except for one thing, a wooden chest sitting in the center, covered in a thick tarp. I froze. The chest was old, the kind you'd see in pirate movies. Iron hinges, heavy wood, and carved into the lid, faint but clear, were the letters. JRM Grandpa's initials, John Robert Miller. My heart started pounding. Why would Grandpa hide something like this? I reached for the latch, but just as I did, I heard something upstairs. A creak, like someone walking across the barn floor above me. I killed the flashlight. The darkness swallowed me whole. The footsteps stopped. For a few seconds, all I could hear was my heartbeat echoing against concrete. Then, another sound. A metallic clink right above the open hatch. Someone was closing it. I sprinted up the ladder, yelling, "Hey, who's there?" But by the time I reached the top, the hatch was wide open, and no one was in sight. The sunlight poured in, bright and cold. I climbed out, scanning the area. Nothing. No footprints, no movement, not even a car on the distant road. But something was different. The padlock I'd broken earlier, it was back, hanging loosely on the latch, closed again. My hands started shaking. I told myself maybe it just fell that way. Maybe I was imagining it. But when I looked closer, I realized it wasn't the same lock. This one was new. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house made me flinch. I kept thinking about Grandpa's warning, and the way he used to glance toward the barn whenever someone mentioned the past. Around midnight, I grabbed my flashlight again and went back out. The air was cold, the moon hanging low over the fields. When I reached the hatch, the new lock was gone. The hatch stood slightly open, like it was inviting me in, and even though every instinct screamed, "Don't," I climbed down anyway. The chest was still there, but this time, it was open. Inside, under a thin layer of burlap, were stacks of old photographs, black and white, faded with age, and every single one showed the same thing. A group of men standing in front of the farmhouse, with my grandfather in the center, and a large metal crate behind them marked with military insignia. At the bottom of the chest was a letter, sealed in wax. The handwriting was unmistakable. Grandpa's. It said, "If you're reading this, it means you didn't listen. And now, you've started something that can't be stopped." I remember staring at those words for a long time. I didn't understand what he meant then, but I would, soon. Because by morning, someone had been inside my house, and they left a single muddy footprint on my kitchen floor. By the time the sun rose, my nerves were shot. The muddy footprint by the kitchen door was the size of a man's boot. Heavy tread, fresh, angled inward like whoever it was had just stepped inside, then stopped. I checked every room in the house. Nothing was missing, nothing was moved. But the silence, it didn't feel like peace anymore. It felt like someone was still there. The letter from the chest sat on the table in front of me, the wax seal half broken. I stared at it for a long time, trying to decide whether opening it would give me answers or more questions. Finally, I took a deep breath and unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, but still undeniably Grandpa's. "Jack, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you found what I hoped you never would. There are things buried on this farm that belong to men far more dangerous than you can imagine. During the war, I was ordered to hide something here. I did my duty, but I never told anyone what it truly was. If anyone ever comes asking about the land, don't trust them. And whatever you do, don't open the crate." Crate? What crate? I shuffled through the photos again. There it was, behind Grandpa and those uniformed men. A massive steel box marked with faded military stencils. I hadn't seen anything like that in the bunker. At least, not yet. I grabbed my flashlight and went back out to the barn. The air felt heavier now, like the whole property was holding its breath. When I opened the hatch again, the ladder creaked louder than before, echoing off the concrete walls. The chest was still open. The photos scattered across the dirt floor. But something was different. There was a faint draft coming from the far wall. I ran my hand along the concrete, feeling for cracks. Then, click. A section of the wall shifted slightly inward. It wasn't a wall at all. It was a hidden panel. Behind it, a tunnel stretched out into the darkness. My light cut through the dust, revealing narrow tracks running along the floor, like old mining rails. The tunnel curved downward, and in the distance I could see something metallic glinting faintly. That's when I saw it. The crate. Massive. Steel. Bolted shut. The same military insignia from the photos stamped on its side. U.S. property, do not open. I swallowed hard. Every instinct told me to leave it alone. But curiosity's a funny thing. It doesn't whisper. It pulls. The crate had a small tag still attached, barely legible. It read, Project Echo, 1954. I had no idea what that meant, but the second I brushed the dust away, my flashlight flickered. Once, twice, then died. For a moment, I stood there in total darkness. I could hear my own breathing, and something else. A faint, steady hum, like electricity coming from inside the crate. I took a step back. The hum got louder. Then there was a sound. Thump, 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 from inside the box. No, it couldn't be. It was impossible. I ran back up the tunnel, climbed the ladder, and slammed the hatch shut behind me. The sound stopped immediately. Back inside the house, I called the sheriff. He was an old friend of Grandpa's, used to come around for coffee every few months. When I told him what I'd found, there was a long pause. Then he said, "Son, do yourself a favor. Leave that box alone." I asked him what he meant, but he just sighed and said he'd stop by in the morning. Then he hung up. That night, I sat in the living room, lights on, shotgun by my side. The house creaked and groaned, the wind scraping against the windows. But somewhere out there, past the fields, beyond the barn, I heard something else. A machine. Low, mechanical, turning over like an engine starting after decades of sleep. The sound came from underground. I stepped outside, heart pounding, and saw it. A faint orange glow seeping through the cracks of the barn floorboards. And then, the windmill started spinning, even though there was no wind. I backed away slowly, eyes fixed on that eerie light. Something was waking up beneath the farm. Something Grandpa had spent his whole life trying to keep buried. And as the glow grew brighter, I realized the truth. This wasn't about an inheritance, or a farm, or even my grandfather's past. It was about whatever was still alive down there. The sheriff showed up just after sunrise. He was an older guy, mid-60s, gray beard, heavy boots, the kind of man who still believed in handshakes and secrets. I could tell he hadn't slept either. His eyes were red, his voice low when he said, "All right, Jack, show me what you found." We walked across the yard toward the barn. The morning fog was thick, rolling like smoke between the fence posts. When I pushed open the door, the metallic smell hit us. Sharp, cold, unnatural. The sheriff's flashlight cut through the dust. He looked around and muttered, "Your granddad never mentioned any of this." I pulled open the hatch and led him down the ladder. The bunker looked the same as before, except now the air was warmer, humming faintly, like static before a storm. The sheriff stopped halfway down the tunnel. His beam froze on the metal crate. "Jesus," he whispered, "I thought they destroyed these." I asked, "What is it?" But he didn't answer. He just stared at the faded words. Project Echo, 1954. Then he said quietly, "Jack, listen to me. This box isn't supposed to exist." He stepped closer, tracing the edge with his gloved hand. "Your grandpa was part of something he shouldn't have been. Military experiment, Cold War era, but not the kind you read about." He turned to me. "They tested frequencies, sound waves that could affect the human brain, make people see things, hear things. Sometimes worse." My stomach tightened. "So what's inside?" He hesitated, then said, "Back then, they built prototypes, machines that could generate the signal. But some said they went further, that they were trying to capture something that answered back." Before I could reply, the crate made a noise, a deep metallic bang. The sheriff jumped, flashlight jerking toward it. The box vibrated once, then went still. We both stood there in silence. The air seemed to thicken. Then the sheriff whispered, We're leaving. Now. I followed him up the ladder, my pulse pounding. But when we reached the top, the barn door was open, wide open, and the fog outside was thicker than before. He drew his gun. "Stay behind me." We stepped out, scanning the field. That's when we saw them, footprints. A trail of them, fresh, wet, leading from the barn toward the woods. But here's the thing. They weren't human. Each print had 5 long, sharp impressions at the front, like claws dragging through the soil, and whatever made them was heavy. The ground sunk several inches deep under each step. The sheriff looked at me, eyes hard. "Get in the house, lock every door, don't come out until I tell you." He followed the tracks into the fog, and I watched him go, until the gray swallowed him completely. Minutes passed. Then, a gunshot. 1, then 2 more. I grabbed the shotgun, ran toward the sound, yelling his name. When I reached the edge of the woods, the fog was so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead. "Sheriff!" I shouted again. No answer. I took another step and nearly tripped over something on the ground. It was his flashlight, cracked, still faintly glowing. Next to it, a smear of blood. The trail led deeper into the trees, but something in me froze. I couldn't move, because right then, from somewhere behind the barn, I heard that same low hum, deeper now, pulsing, alive. I turned slowly. The windmill was spinning again, faster than before, and from beneath the barn, that orange glow had returned. But this time, it was brighter, spreading through the cracks like fire. Then I saw movement, something rising behind the barn, tall, thin, wrong. The fog shifted just enough for me to see it clearly for half a second, and what I saw didn't make sense. It was shaped like a man, but the proportions were off, too long, too stretched. Its skin looked like static, flickering, like a signal that couldn't hold shape. I stumbled backward. Heart slamming in my chest, the thing tilted its head toward me, not like it was looking, but like it was listening. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it melted back into the fog. I ran. I don't even remember how I got back inside the house. I locked every door, every window, sat on the floor, and tried to breathe. Outside, the windmill kept spinning, and beneath it, the hum grew louder, steady, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. That was the moment I realized Grandpa hadn't just buried something dangerous. He'd trapped it, and I had just set it free. I didn't sleep that night. Every few minutes, I heard it again, that low hum vibrating through the walls, rattling the glasses in the kitchen cabinets. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was like it was inside me, in my chest, in my head. By dawn, the fog had finally lifted. But the sheriff never came back. His cruiser still sat by the fence, door open, radio hissing static. I tried calling for help, but the phone was dead. No signal, no dial tone. Just that same faint interference sound. I told myself I'd leave, pack what I could, drive away, forget the whole damn thing. But when I stepped outside, I saw something that made me freeze. Everywhere, in the dirt, the porch steps, even the walls of the barn, were strange symbols, circles within circles, etched deep into the wood and soil. And right in the center of the yard, burned into the grass, was one enormous mark, glowing faintly red in the morning light. It wasn't random, it was deliberate, and it looked exactly like the insignia on that crate. I don't know what made me do it, but I found myself walking back toward the barn. Every step I took, that hum grew louder. My skin tingled, like the air itself was charged with electricity. When I opened the door, the inside of the barn looked different. The walls were vibrating, the rafters creaking under pressure. The windmill above spun faster and faster, though the air was perfectly still. And in the center of the floor, where the hatch used to be, was a crack of light. The hatch was gone. In its place was an open pit, glowing orange, pulsing like a heartbeat. I leaned forward, trying to see how deep it went. And that's when I heard it. A voice, soft, distant, familiar. "Jack!" It was my grandfather's voice. I stumbled back, my chest tight. "No! No, you're dead! You weren't supposed to open it, son." I looked around trying to find the source. The voice wasn't coming from the air. It was inside my head. I tried to keep it sealed. It wasn't just a machine. It was alive, Jack. It needed a host. Then the hum grew louder, deeper, vibrating in my bones. The light from the pit flared bright enough to blind me. When it faded, something stood there. It looked like me. Same face, same clothes. But its eyes, they were black, hollow. I stumbled backward, hitting a beam. What the hell? It smiled. You opened the door. I've been waiting. Then everything went white. When I came to, I was lying on the floor of the barn. The morning sun streamed through the gaps in the boards. The hatch was back, sealed shut. For a moment I thought I'd dreamed the whole thing, but then I saw the blood, a trail of it, leading from the hatch to the house. I followed it inside. The footprints were bare, human-sized, soaked deep into the wooden floor. They stopped at the kitchen table, and on the table was my grandfather's letter. Only this time, new words had appeared beneath his old signature, written in a shaky hand that wasn't his, but mine. The host is chosen. The cycle begins again. I dropped the letter. My hands were trembling uncontrollably. Then I saw movement outside, a figure standing by the windmill. From that distance, it looked like a man, same build, same jacket, same face, my face. He just stood there, watching me. Then he turned and started walking toward the woods, slow, deliberate. I ran after him, yelling, "Who are you?" He didn't turn around. When I reached the tree line, he was gone. But carved into the bark of the nearest tree was a single word, burned into the wood like it had been branded there. That night, I packed everything I could and left. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get away. But even as I drove, I couldn't shake it. That low hum in the background, faint at first, then louder, vibrating the dashboard. I turned off the radio, the engine, everything. The hum stayed. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw headlights behind me. A truck, old, familiar. It was Grandpa's truck, the one that had been sitting rusted behind the barn for years. I pulled over, heart pounding. The truck slowed too, stopped 100 feet behind me. The driver's door opened and a figure stepped out. Same height, same face. Me? He smiled, and then the headlights went out. When I got back into my car and started it again, my reflection in the mirror didn't move right away. It just smiled back. I didn't remember getting home. The next thing I knew, I was standing in my kitchen, staring at the cracked window. Outside, the fog had rolled in again, thick and heavy, swallowing the trees, the barn, everything. And then, the hum returned. It came from inside the walls this time. Every vibration felt like it was crawling beneath my skin, twisting something deep in my chest. I gripped the counter, gasping for breath, when I heard the front door creak open. Footsteps, slow, measured, and then a voice, my voice. You can't run from what you are. I turned. Standing in the doorway was the other me, the one from the barn, the one from the truck. He looked calm, peaceful, like a version of me that had already accepted something I refused to believe. "Who are you?" I whispered. "I'm what Grandpa made sure would survive. You were never meant to find the hatch, Jack. You were just supposed to replace me." He stepped closer. The air around him shimmered, almost bending. His eyes weren't black this time. They were glowing faintly gold, flickering like a dying light bulb. "This place isn't a farm. It's a vessel, a generator. Every generation, one of us becomes the source." I backed up, shaking my head. "No, you're lying." He smiled, that same crooked grin I'd seen in the mirror my whole life. "Then why do you hear it too?" And in that moment, I realized the hum wasn't coming from outside at all. It was coming from me. It pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. Each thump echoed louder, the room trembling around me. Dishes fell, glass shattered, light bulbs burst. I screamed, trying to drown it out, trying to stop it. But then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my kitchen anymore. I was back in the barn, only this time everything was clean, new, polished, like it hadn't aged a day. Grandpa was there too, sitting on his old chair, hands folded, looking right at me. "Grandpa," I croaked. He smiled sadly. "You finally came back, son. What's happening to me?" He stood, walking toward the hatch, or what looked like it. But when he touched it, the floor rippled like water. This land was built on something ancient, Jack. Something that remembers. My father found it. I tried to contain it, but it always finds a way. Through blood, through memory. He placed his hand on my chest. I felt warmth spread through me, soft at first, then burning. You can fight it, or you can become it. That's how I stayed alive for so long. That's why your grandmother never aged. She wasn't real anymore. She was an echo. The word hung in the air. Echo. The same one carved into the tree. What do you mean an echo? I gasped. A copy, he said softly. Not flesh, not spirit, just the memory of a man repeating itself through time. I stumbled back. No, I'm real. I'm not. But as I said it, my hand flickered, like static on an old TV. The truth hit me like a freight train. The real Jack, me, had died the night I opened that hatch. The thing that crawled out, the one telling this story right now, wasn't human anymore. I fell to my knees, screaming. How do I stop it? Grandpa's voice echoed in my head. You don't. You pass it on. Then the world around me began to dissolve, the barn melting away, the light collapsing into a single point. And in that final flash, I saw her. My wife, standing in the doorway, tears in her eyes. Jack, are you here? I tried to call out, but no sound came. My body was fading, pixel by pixel, into the light. She stepped closer, her hand trembling. I shouldn't have left. I'm sorry. Then she touched the hatch, and the hum roared to life again. The camera fades to black. The hum continues for a few seconds. Then a distorted whisper cuts through. The host is chosen. And finally, one last sound, the windmill turning. Slow, relentless,